Now welcome to another lightning response video, where this time we got a couple questions about the Acolyte, including one about what my predictions are for the finale. And with that being tonight, we'll quickly see how well or poorly this video ages. But anyway, let's waste no more time and get right to the first question, which comes to us from Piano Scott DeBoer, who asked, "Hey Thor, what are your predictions for the last episode? I hate to say it, but since we left off episode 6 with Osha putting on the helmet, I suspect that the final will be her in that helmet getting the Sith point of view of what happened on that day. Leslie Headland said in at least one interview that the show is based on Rashomon, and that movie gave the event from 3 points of view. If she did that, it might show an even more negative view of the Jedi as it would be from the Sith perspective, and might give us the same boring scenes from another angle, which would really make us question how that 180 million was spent. The power of one, the power of two, the power of many of the same boring episodes, lol." And the funny thing is, as you're kind of pointing out here, I think you almost have to give us another perspective of that night in the final episode. Otherwise, what was really the point of doing it this way? Why did Headland say this was going to essentially use the Rashomon effect, where different people can and will give very different versions of the same event, if the two perspectives we have seen thus far don't really conflict with each other and instead just kind of fit together like a puzzle to make one complete version? Though that said, I don't really know how much, assuming it will be the Sith perspective or Kamir's perspective, assuming he was there that night, but I'm not sure how that'll change much of anything. I mean, and I kind of thought and said this might be the case before, but it could be that he was there the whole time, Kamir was there the whole time looking into the virgins as well, and he discovered the twins and he wants one to become his apprentice, which kind of makes sense because one did become his apprentice. And so when he discovers the Jedi are there too, he somehow undermines them or somehow makes them look bad in the eyes of the witches, and that is what will provoke the witches to act the way they did. And this will cause the confrontation that gets the witches killed, and then he can just take May or Osha, or both, or whatever. Assuming then that the Jedi were killed by the witches, because they of course want to take the twins too, so he would have to either hope the witches killed the Jedi, or that he would kill the Jedi himself, and frame the witches, and that way when the Jedi show up to investigate, they just kind of assume this was one big battle, and the Jedi killed some witches, the witches killed some Jedi, and the compound blew up and everybody died. But anyway, I'm not even sure how much that would even work exactly. Not that it obviously played out that way, but that we would need the Sith there to kind of sell the Jedi as the bad guys to the witches. They seem like they probably already would have had a pretty negative view of the Jedi. Though we also can't forget that Mother Anastasia ultimately decides to let Osha go with the Jedi, so I don't think she's being that heavily influenced by the Sith and the Shadows. I don't think she is being turned against the Jedi by them. I think she just doesn't like them, but when she realizes her daughter wants to go, she's like, well, I guess they're not a terrible organization. We don't see eye to eye, but you can go and choose the life you want. Basically, I don't think she'd let her daughter pick them if she truly thought the Jedi were all that bad, or if there were a Sith convincing her that they were just this terrible organization. Though I suppose, and I think I'm confusing myself here with all of this, but I suppose Kamir doesn't have to be influencing all of the witches. He could just be influencing Coral, for example, and that is then why she is kinda acting the way she is in episode 7. That is why she is refusing to let Osha go with the Jedi, because she has been listening to the Sith. She thinks the Jedi are the worst thing ever, and that is even why she is yelling at May that you have to stop your sister, and is telling all the other witches to kind of take up arms against the Jedi and all of that. Maybe if that is what we see in the final episode, we see Kamir talking with Coral, warning her about what'll happen if the Jedi get their hands on her daughter. It'll somehow make more sense or add a new layer of context or something. And if something like this does happen, the show will basically do or make the point that I thought it might try to make all along, which is that both the Jedi and Sith, or whatever Kamir technically is, they are both in the wrong, both sides, both extremes. You could say the extreme light and the extreme dark. Being after children in order to carry on their ways led to the destruction of the witches. And if it wasn't for both of them, or either one of them, if neither side wanted their children, if there were no Jedi and Sith, they just get to live there. The witches just get to live there on that planet in peace all by themselves forever They get to live happily ever after if it's not for the Jedi and the Sith having to be after children, or just existing in the first place. And so I'm not going to be all too surprised at all if we learn that Khmer was indeed there. In fact, that is going to be my prediction. I'm going to go with that. He was influencing Coral. Why not just go with that as my prediction? I think that's about the only thing that they could do at this point that, again, would in any way justify saying that they used the Rashomon effect. Even though that still wouldn't really be what it is, because the idea behind the Rashomon effect is that you're going to get contradictory versions of events based on individual points of view. It's supposed to be a commentary about how unreliable eyewitness testimony can be. That two people can see the exact same event but come out with radically different versions of what actually happened. And that really isn't what we have gotten so far, at least not when it comes to episodes 3 and 7. Like I was saying before, we just kind of got the same version of events. We kind of got the details filled in. When we saw the Jedi point of view and the witch's point of view, they seem to line up pretty well. There's nothing all that contradictory about them. But anyway, to finish out my predictions here, I think we're going to go back to Brendok in the present tense of the story, which seems to kind of be confirmed in some of the trailers or commercials. There are more clips out there on that planet in the present tense, I believe, that we haven't seen yet. So I think we're going to go back there and have a big final confrontation between Khmer and Sol and between May and Osha. And I think Sol will have to die, considering all he knows at this point, and that he does seem to want to report it all back to the Council, the whole truth about everything. So it makes sense that he dies and never gets to do that, otherwise they're going to have a lot of information about the Sith, or again about whatever Khmer technically is. I also think one of the twins will die, and I think it is going to be May. I think that is going to be the twist. I think Osha is going to go full on dark side for reasons, or has always been dark side somehow. She has been the dark side and May has technically been the light of this Virgins or something like that. Or she is going to fully believe something Khmer tells her about that night. It is going to recontextualize everything she thought she knew, and she's going to embrace the dark side now. Or that something she sees while wearing the helmet from that night is going to change her perspective on everything. I do think one way or another there is, shall we say, a missing piece of the puzzle that will, again, attempt to recontextualize the whole thing, and when Osha sees it, it's going to turn her against the Jedi and against Sol, and she'll side with Khmer. And then, after it's all over, after Khmer and Osha walk into the sunset together or something, we'll get a post-credit scene where a real Sith, one from the lore, perhaps, like a Plagueis or Tenebris, and Tenebris was Plagueis' master, for those who don't know, well, one of them will show up in a post-credit scene and kill Khmer and take Osha off to be his new apprentice. She will be an official Sith. Or the Sith will say you deserve to be trained by, again, a real Sith and not a pretender or whatever Khmer is. That's how I think this all wraps up in the, again, the post-credit scene. And no, if it is Tenebris taking her, I don't think that implies they're going to make Osha into Darth Plagueis or something really stupid like that. Tenebris in the novel, or in the Plagueis novel, already had more than one apprentice, and this ending, or this post-credit scene, would then sort of set up a season 2 where we see Osha being trained and how she'll eventually become a rival for Darth Plagueis or something like that. And I do believe Headland recently said that this would, if there was a season 2 of this show, it would connect to Plagueis somehow. So yeah, those are my predictions. Sol is killed by Khmer and Osha for reasons, then kills May and becomes his, or becomes Khmer's apprentice. But then there will be a post-credit scene where Khmer is killed by Tenebris, or some other Sith, it doesn't have to be Tenebris. And we're then all left on the edge of our seats waiting for Season 2. And like I said at the start, with the episode only a few hours away at the time of posting this video, we'll know soon enough just how very wrong I was. But anyway, I think that is going to be all I got for you this time. Now it is your turn to take to the comments below and tell me what you think is going to happen in this final episode of The Acolyte tonight. How does this all end? Or feel free to ask a question for a future lightning response or thunderous ramble video. All you gotta do is start your comment off with "Hey Thor" and then ask away. And I am going to try to do another long thunderous ramble video where I answer a bunch of questions in the very near future. But for now, leave those comments below, let's talk some Star Wars, and until next time, thanks for watching.